So you feel that cold on the back of your neck. You hear those whispers behind your ear, and you smell the witch's brew. It's 2017. It's horror month. Welcome to the Dave Decay Show. Tonight we have a classic for you. This movie came out in 1975. And also tonight I have an expert with me. Now, not only is this person an expert on split personalities, not only are they an expert on serial killers, they're also an expert on voodoo.
Okay.
We booked the right person, didn't we, Toothy?
I got on the internet and I looked up Fetish, and this was the first name that popped up, so I'd say he's an expert, all right.
Okay, so like I said, this movie came out in 1975, and it stars Catherine Black.
No, it stars Karen Black.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
And it's also directed by Dan Curtis. Now, Vince, do you know who Dan Curtis is? Well, I'll tell you who he is. He actually created the classic show called Dark Shadows.
Ah, okay, yeah.
This actually was supposed to be a brand new show on, I think it was CBS, back in the 70s. Sort of like Twilight Zone and Tales from the Dark Side, stuff like that. But it never really got picked up, so we only had this one episode.
I think it was ABC.
That's why you're here, Vince, because you're the expert.
Well, that's because at the end of the film it comes up and says something about ABC Films.
So there's 3 different stories here, and they all star the same person, Karen Black.
Yeah, she plays like 5 different characters in this film.
And I gotta say, too, that all of these stories are written by Richard Matheson.
Yeah, they were all short stories or something, or derived from what his stories were, novels, whatever.
Yeah, and Richard Matheson, obviously, is a master of horror as well. So it's pretty exciting they got him to do these stories for the show.
And all 3 of these stories are really entertaining.
Yeah, they are. And I don't really understand why this didn't get picked up by ABC for a weekly show. It would have been amazing.
Now, being that it is as old as it is, and being that it was on television, somebody watching it today would sit there and go, man, this kind of drags. It's kind of slow, because things today just kind of move like that, you know, they would move through a lot of this story. But back then, if you remember the time frame watching this, you know, it makes perfect sense as to why the pacing of the film is the way it is.
Yeah, it's a little like Alfred Hitchcock Presents, where it sets up the story, and then you got the stinger at the end. So all 3 stories, except for maybe the last one, I guess the last one too, has, you know, the plot, basically, and then you got the reveal at the end, which is supposed to be the big surprise.
Exactly, and all 3 of them, the first 2 are kind of the same. They're kind of similar to each other, because mostly because the 3 characters she plays are similar to each other.
And I would say that this movie was a little risque for its time, actually.
Yeah, it actually got pretty bloody for what it was. And like we said, it's on television. You know, it premiered on TV. It wasn't on the big screen. You didn't go to the movies to go see this. It was on TV. So showing as much blood as they did was actually kind of pushing the envelope.
It's, like I said, it's sort of risque what they did back then. They didn't really show anything because it was on television, but they imply a lot of stuff, like being drugged for a date, and then being dragged into a hotel room and then being taken pictures of in sort of precarious, shall we say,
Poses?
exactly. So yeah, and that was pretty much what the first story was about, was this real sort of nerdy kind of school teacher who decided to start dating a student, and he drugs her, takes her to a hotel room, and takes these pictures of her, and then forces her to do weekly things that we can't really describe on this show.
Now, my mom was never a big horror movie kind of person, but she did like Twilight Zone. She did like Alfred Hitchcock and Night Gallery and things like that, Tales from the Dark Side. She kind of liked those things, and she loved the plot twists and the mystery and the suspense about things. She didn't really get into bloody, gory horror kind of things, is what I'm getting at. She was the one that actually told me about this film way back when, and I had no clue about this. I never even knew it existed until she told me about it. She says, because as a matter of fact, we were watching Child's Play, and she says, this is kind of reminiscent of Trilogy of Terror. Did you ever see that? And I said, no. What is that? And she goes, it was a movie that came on a long time ago, and it had this little doll in it. And the doll chased this woman around. It was really pretty scary, too. And I remember to this day her telling me this, and I never did get to see it until I was like a teenager when I first watched this movie.
I don't even think people even know this is a trilogy. I think they just remember that story and don't remember anything else about this movie.
Yeah, pretty much, because that was the story that had the most impact. Kind of like Creepshow 2. It's like everybody remembers Creepshow 2, but the one story they remember the most out of it is The Hitchhiker.
Yeah, and the second story wasn't bad either. I mean, the second story was pretty good. The only thing with the second story is a little predictable. I mean, by the middle of it, you already kind of know what's going on. So, and there's not a real big shock ending to it because you kind of already figured it out.
It does kind of give it away. But I actually liked the second story more than the first one. I think the first one was probably the lamest one out of all three.
Then we get to story number 3 that everybody obviously remembers. Now, watching this all these years later, I gotta say, I think it still holds up. I think it's a fantastic story, and it's still pretty creepy.
Oh yeah, it definitely holds up. I mean, as far as the story goes, the story, each one of these actually are really good stories. The only thing that makes them really dated is the fact that it came out in 1970s, and all the cars are a certain way. Everybody's dressed a certain way. I mean, the way it's filmed is filmed like a TV movie, and it's just everything's from the 70s. So I mean, it is a little dated considering that, but the story itself, these are great stories. They could be told at any time if they wanted to retell them.
I think that's kind of the fun of this, is because of watching it as a sort of a nostalgic look back in the 70s. And I enjoyed that part of the movie. Now, the third film here is obviously about this killer doll. And it is a Zuni Fetish African what now?
I forget what it was.
Close enough, I guess. Anyway, so she buys this little wooden doll, and the thing is creepy looking. And to this day, they did such an amazing job with this doll. And when you look at it, you're like, wow, that is so cool and creepy looking. And the thing with the doll is, it has a golden chain around it, and there's a scroll that comes with it, and it says if you golden chain falls off the doll, it'll come alive, and the spirit of the warrior will come into the doll. Now, I believe she got it for her boyfriend. It's a short film, but they do such a great job with the character development within the first 5 minutes of the film. You kind of figure out that her mom doesn't want her dating, doesn't want her living on her own, and she has this new boyfriend, and it does a really good job of developing characters, actually, in this one.
Yeah, it does. It has a bunch of character development without actually showing any other characters, because she's the only character in it. And she's on the phone with her mom, and like you said, you kind of get the feeling that, her mom doesn't want her there. Her mom wants her home with her. And I guess she used to take care of her mom or something like. I mean, there's a whole lot of backstory to it that you get in just the first 5 minutes of her making a phone call.
And once this doll does come alive, it's amazing. It's absolutely so much fun. And in a world that we are just bombarded with CG and, mechanical effects that are really outrageously, expensive, and all this stuff they have this today. They got this little wooden doll, and there's some guy off the side of the screen making this thing come at you, and there's obviously there's zero technical effects, but it's done so well.
That's practical effects right there. That's basic practical effects right there. They spent almost no money on this thing, and you could tell they spent almost no money on this thing. They've got this little doll, and what they do with it is just amazing. And you would actually believe that it's alive. They made it come to life without using CGI.
They did like the perspective of it like running towards her, and just like an arm coming through the door and things like that. It was so cool, and this movie is so awesome. And if you got a chance, and right around now that it's October, they might show this on some movie channel somewhere. So if you haven't seen it for a long time, flip around and see if you can check it out. And if you've never seen it, I think you guys are in for a huge treat.
Yeah, and believe it or not, there is actually a sequel to this. There is a Trilogy of Terror 2, and it came out in the late 90s.
I'm going to try to get that to you guys this month as well, because I really want to see the sequel to this. So, in all, this was a great film, and all three stories are pretty solid, but of course the last one is the best out of all three of them. So, I would give Trilogy of Terror a 5 out of 5.
And I would also give Trilogy of Terror a 5 out of 5.
As always, stay spooky.